Hi, this is Mary Beth Callahan. Welcome to How to Have a Good Future with Kidney Disease, Coming to Terms. I've been a nephrology social worker for about 30 years. That means that I've had the opportunity to work with people who have kidney disease, who've been on dialysis or had a transplant or had chronic kidney disease during this time. And it's my privilege to be with you here today to talk to you about chronic kidney disease, dialysis, transplant, and how you might be able to get support for this during this time, or how your family members or friends might be able to get information. And as we go through the presentation today, you will want to have a paper and pen handy. We're going to go through some questions, and you may want to jot down some information. So I'm going to ask you to grab a paper and pen as I go through to the next slide. Thank you again for being with us here today. You see a tree here, and all of us have been outside at some point in time when the wind was blowing really strong. I grew up along the Gulf Coast in Louisiana, and we had hurricanes sometimes, and so it got really windy sometimes. And yet, when we have been outside in the wind, sometimes it feels good to have the wind blow us, back and forth. And yet, we know that the wind can be very strong and very powerful. And sometimes things in life come to us that are very strong and very powerful. And something like kidney disease can seem very strong and very powerful, and it can be a big life change. And yet, we know that just like that tree that has a strong inner core, we have strength in our inner core from things that have happened to us before that we've gotten through. And there's no doubt that just like the tree that can bend but not break, we also can bend but not break as we adapt to the hurricanes or the strong winds that come into our life. So let's talk about that a little bit more. When you first learn about kidney disease, it may seem like a big tidal wave is coming over you. Sometimes people don't really even know that they have kidney disease until they have to decide on picking a treatment. Sometimes it comes as more of a surprise, and it can feel like a giant wave crashing down upon you when you really don't know how to surf at all. So we're going to talk a little bit about learning how to surf through some of that today. It's very normal to have strong feelings and strong emotions about kidney disease, and it's important to be honest about our feelings, whether that's feelings of fear or sadness or anger. Sometimes I think we feel embarrassed to have these emotions because it looks like life is going on around us and other people aren't having these emotions. We don't know how other people are thinking about what's going on in our life, if they even know about it. But it is important to realize that everyone has emotions and everyone has strong emotions at some points in time. I think one of the things that I've learned over the years through my own adventures in life, as well as learning from the patients that I've had the privilege to walk with through the years, is that sometimes the unknown can be the scariest thing of all. For many of us, getting knowledge can help us feel that we're more in control, and it can help us to be able to cope a little better and to feel a little bit better about what we are approaching. And that's part of what we want to do here today. So we're going to talk a little bit about depression. In the general population, depression is very common, and it's even more so in the population that has chronic illness. Chronic kidney disease can make you feel sad and hopeless and sometimes even guilty. Sometimes we wonder, well, if I hadn't done this or I hadn't done that, had I not eaten this, had I not drunk that, I might not be here today. We're here today, and we are where we are, and we want to try and deal with where we are. Some signs of depression that we need to watch out for, or maybe have a partner that helps us to watch out for, are changes in our eating and our sleeping patterns, whether we're eating more, eating less, sleeping more, sleeping less. Sometimes when we're experiencing depression, we might be able to fall asleep, but we'll wake up, 2 or 3 hours into our sleep process and stay awake for 3 hours. And that might be a cue for us that maybe I'm feeling some depression. The other thing that's important for us to think about is that depression can make our feelings of pain worse. Our physical pain can make those symptoms worse. So if we can be watchful of depression and be open to talking to someone about depression and open to getting treatment for it, then our overall outlook and experience of pain, total experience, can be less. Depression is often caused by changes in chemicals in our brain. Sometimes it happens when we're having a hard time adjusting to change, such as kidney disease. But the important thing to remember is that we don't have to stay feeling depressed. There are many ways that a person feeling depression can be helped. It can be talking to someone like a social worker or a counselor. We might need medication for a short period of time or longer. But the important thing to know is that there is hope and that depression can get better. The other thing that I think happens often is that sometimes it's easier for us to respond in anger than to face to ourselves that we might be feeling depression. And feeling angry is very normal. Sometimes we feel angry because we don't have control over what's happening, because the disease is here, it's not going away. Sometimes we feel angry because how did God let us get sick? How did this happen? Why did this happen? And sometimes we might feel angry at what the doctor is recommending. Isn't there another way around this? Sometimes we might feel angry at ourselves, and sometimes we might feel angry at the people around us. But then, sometimes we combine feeling angry with feeling guilty about feeling angry. So we can end up feeling really bad. And we can all go through this. None of us are immune to this. So what I might suggest to you is that if you find yourself doing that, try to stop and think about what is really troubling me, what's really going on here. And you might need to just have a small tablet of paper that you can keep in a safe place for only you and just write down what some of those thoughts are. Or you might find someone who you can talk to for 3 or 4 weeks at a time as you're going through a different phase of adaptation to kidney disease. But these are very normal feelings. An important thing to remember, very important thing if you hear nothing else through this presentation, is that you can have a really good future with kidney disease. I was really encouraged this week when a patient that I've known for many years came in for her normal checkup, and she reminded us that in September she'll be celebrating 30 years with her current transplant. Now, she's working full-time, and she's approaching 65, so we were talking about what to do with insurance as she approaches 65, though she's not retiring yet. But in addition to her job, she has also developed a passion for taking nature photography. And so she takes beautiful nature photography. We have an arboretum here in Dallas, and she'll go there. She'll go to little creeks around the city and take pictures of tadpoles, and she finds joy in every day. Now, it's not been a totally smooth path for her over these 30 years. There have been bumps in the road, as there are for all of us, but she finds the best in every day, and it's encouraging for all of us. Additionally, I'm reminded of a patient who began dialysis at 17, and she did lose her first transplant pretty much immediately after the transplant, back when she was 17. She's in the process of retiring now at age 55. She went to school to become a nurse, And through her nursing, she ended up working in IT at the hospital in the computer system after some time of doing critical care nursing. And after many years with a second transplant, is back on dialysis now, enlisted for her third transplant. And thinking of the tree reminds me of this patient, how she has really gone through some ups and downs, but looks towards the future, looks towards her nephews who are being born, and enjoys each day. I think it's important to try and keep kidney disease and perhaps dialysis and maybe transplant a small part of your life, and to remember that you are still you, even though, in this case, your kidneys might not be working. And I'm not suggesting that this is going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but you've likely been through difficult times before. Most of us can't get by without having that happen, but you've gotten through those times. And I'd like for you to think about some of the ways that you found strength during those times, and remember that you can still have a good future. Keep following your dreams. Your dreams may have to change a little bit. We may have to break our dreams down into smaller pieces sometimes when illness comes into our life to be able to accomplish them, but we can still keep tracking towards our goal and towards our dreams. And so I'd like for you to remember that you can still have a future with kidney disease. And as we talked about, these things don't come by accident. People who live for 20 or 30 or 40 years with kidney failure, they put effort into living well with kidney disease. And you're the central person in your care. You're going to have a team of people working with you, and you may already know that, but you are the center of your care. And so the doctors and the nurses, the dietitians, the social workers, all are there to help you accomplish your goals. And so you may sometimes think that they know that you feel such and such a way when you're away from dialysis, or such and such a way when you're not there at the doctor's office if you're having chronic kidney disease before dialysis, but that may not be correct at all. I encourage you to let your team know how you're feeling and how your chronic kidney disease impacts your day-to-day life so that they can help you to live more fully. The other thing that sometimes happens, and I'm certainly guilty of this, is that sometimes we provide information over and over to patients, and so to us it seems like it should be understandable, but it is often not understandable. I was at a new doctor myself yesterday, and he was explaining certain information to me that I'd not heard before, and it was a lot of information. And as I was leaving, I was aware that I had to go home and study because there was so much information that I was given and so many things that I needed to do that I certainly could not remember but maybe 20% of what I was told. And so it's okay to ask questions. It's important to ask questions. And it's important to ask questions until you get the answer in a way that you understand so that you can be the best caregiver for yourself that you can be. And then I think perhaps underlying everything, if we can keep a positive attitude, that will take us a long way. Over the next few slides, we're going to ask you to just think about through some questions that will be on the screen, and this is where you'll need your paper and pen. So if you haven't gotten up to get that yet, if you would do that, but to think about how you react to setbacks. And these things kind of ask us to look at our attitudes towards life. So let's look at the next few slides. Why do you think kidney disease happened to you? I'd like for you to just put down the letter A, B, C, or D, or E to this. And I'm going to read these out in case you have some vision problems. A, it was what I needed to have happen. B, because of my mistakes. C, random chance. D, I seem to attract troubles often. E, nothing ever goes right for me. So just select one of those. The next question, what have you learned from having kidney disease? A, how to turn lemons into lemonade. B, how to overcome obstacles. C, nothing. D, to expect more bad things. E, I just can't win. The next question, how has kidney disease changed you? A, for the better. B, I gained some new strengths. C, it didn't change me. D, I'm worse off than before. E, it just about destroyed me. Next question, how often might things like this happen to you in the future? A, never. B, hardly ever. C, sometimes. D, often. E, all the time. Next question, how often do things like this happen elsewhere in your life? A, never. B, hardly ever. C, sometimes. D, often. E, all the time. Thank you for taking that little awareness review with us there. Let's just think back over your answers to the questions and just to yourself, were they mostly A's, B's, C's, D's, or E's? You're probably able to tell that the A answers were mostly optimistic and the E answers were mostly pessimistic. And of course, life is somewhere in between for the most part, so you could be somewhere in between just as well. It's not always easy to change the way we think about things, but it may be important for us to try not to generalize about things, to think that life is always going to be bad, that nothing will ever go right again. If we start thinking that way, it may shade the way we look at life. And one of the things that someone gave me, it's a little card someone gave me, a patient a long time ago, is right in front of me with a little turtle at the bottom of it. It says, believe every day is the best day of the year. And it's hard some days to hold on to that thought. And sometimes I have to look at a positive thought several times during the day if it's a rough day for whatever reason. And I imagine that could be the case for you. But something to think about is to try to avoid generalizing. Try to think, is this fact or is it just a thought? Is it really a fact that life will always be bad and nothing will ever go right again? Or is that just a thought I'm having? So that's just something to consider. This quote is by Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor. He was in a concentration camp for about 3 years, and he wrote a book. I think it was after that experience. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And it was how he was able to stay alive and try to focus on positive things while he was in the concentration camp. And this quote is, the last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And what he's saying is that we are really not able to choose what happens to us, as he was not able to choose in the concentration camp. But we are always able to choose how we think about it. Remember the thought or the fact. Thought or the fact. We're always able to choose how we think about it. How we look at things is a frame, like the frame on this picture. You can choose to reframe how you choose to think about something. And reframing does get easier with practice. it takes practice, and it takes a real awareness in the beginning of trying to reframe something, but it can be done. Let's look at the next few slides and see how we can look at things in more than one way. You may have already seen a picture like this. Can you see a vase, or can you see two faces? The vase is white and the faces are black. What about this? Which orange dot do you think is bigger, the one on the right or the one on the left? Well, they're both the same. And so in this situation, it kind of can help us think about the context of our situations and how we see things differently. And we're going to look at a little girl in a little while and try and remember this picture as well. But the dots are an equal size. Now, on this picture, it looks like the center of this image bulges out, doesn't it? But they don't. All the lines are straight. And this shows us that sometimes we don't really see things as they really are. We may have a thought about something, but it may not be a fact. So, this cute little girl, when we look at her, do we think that she's being stubborn right now or persistent? If it was your daughter or your granddaughter, giving her the benefit of the doubt, I guess if we said that she was persistent, we would be going with the fact that that was a little bit more positive. We could look at it either way, but we're reframing it more positively if we say that she's being persistent. And she is adorable, so I'm sure she's being persistent. Her behavior is the same, but if you look at it differently, you can give it a different label. And again, this is called reframing. And sometimes when we can reframe things, we can be more hopeful. These pictures there are from Nick Vujicic, who was born in Australia with no arms or legs. And he wrote about life without limits. Needless to say, we can imagine that he has had and has difficult times. Nevertheless, he came to a point where he realized he had a purpose in life, and that purpose was to help others see obstacles in their own lives as chances to grow. He had to learn to accept his situation before he could make this realization that he could make a difference for others. Today, he has a motivational speaking company and a nonprofit organization. He got married in 2011, and he and his wife have a beautiful son who is healthy and normal. Nick found his inner strength and likely used reframing to help him have his positive approach to life. It's natural at times to look backwards. I think that happens to all of us, wanting to turn the clock back, to step into a time machine, to think, gosh, if I hadn't done this, maybe I wouldn't be here now. And it's easy to do that. And if we feel that we have to do that every now and then, we might allow ourselves 1 minute to do it. And then I think we need to turn ourselves forward. We need to really give ourselves that minute if it's important to have that for 1 minute, but then redirect ourselves to point forward, to point towards the future. Because we need to look for those good times ahead of us, not just what was behind us. Because asking why me doesn't usually get us too far. There's really not any real answers. So when we start thinking about things like, I wish I had, or if only those are usually some hints that we're looking backward, and we might need to help ourselves kind of pull us up from our bootstraps and redirect ourselves to look forward. Focusing on the future instead of on the past allows us to think about what we can still do. And it's important to not limit ourselves unnecessarily. You might have ideas that now that I have kidney disease, I'm going to have to not do X, Y, and Z. I'd ask you not to assume that. I'd ask you to check with your doctor on some things if you need to, and then if he or she gives you an answer that you still question, ask why. You want to not limit yourself unnecessarily. Don't assume that you can't do something. Assume that you can, and check with your doctor to be sure that you can do it without hurting yourself. But people do so many things now while on dialysis, living a really good life, because there are so many types of dialysis now that allow people to feel good while on dialysis. But looking back just for a minute to 60 years ago, back in the 1950s, there wasn't dialysis. There wasn't transplant for kidney failure. And then back in the 60s, when dialysis started in Seattle, there weren't enough dialysis machines for people. So there had to be committees of lay people and clergy to decide who could get the life-saving treatment that was known as dialysis. Today, on the other hand, if a person's kidneys fail, there are treatments available to help you have a good life. And so again, that's looking forward. Thinking about those strengths from the tree that we saw in the beginning, remember that you've coped with problems before, whether that was financial, emotional, the loss of a home, the loss of a loved one. Remember to find that strength. Remember what skills you used. Were those educational skills, looking up things, talking to someone? Remember that people are available to help you, whether that be a social worker, a clergy member, or a counselor. Also helpful to find support, whether that's in person or online. Sometimes it helps to talk with others who are going through the same thing. There are a number of support groups around the country, but if there are not some available in your area, you may be the person to start one, and that would be great. The internet is available for you 24/7, and a good way to start Googling is kidney disease support to find support groups. And this can lead to a great deal of support. Remember that your doctor does know a lot, but your job is to ask questions. And for me, I now keep my questions for my doctors on my phone. If you have a phone, that may be a good place to do it under notes. But write down the questions and bring them with you to your doctor visits. And you may want to prioritize them in case you run out of time. So what's the most important thing to get answered this time when I go to the doctor? And try and be specific. You can do your homework ahead of time. This is what I saw. Is this correct? How does it affect me? Be sure to ask anything that you feel is holding you back. Do I really need to not do this, or is it okay for me to go ahead and do this exercise or whatever? The other thing is, we need to be honest with our doctors so that they can fully help us. If you are taking non-prescribed drugs or street drugs, the physician needs to know so that they can more fully help you manage your care. Sometimes the other thing that I find is helpful when either I'm giving information or I'm getting information from my doctors is to have a support person, because two heads are better than one. I know sometimes when my husband comes with me to appointments, he'll bring his computer, and that was before computers were very common. He would bring it, and I'd say, "Oh, I'm not sure this is going to be good. It might be intimidating to the doctor," but he did it anyway. So write things down, or have the other person write things down as you're meeting with the doctor. Ask them to spell medical terms if you don't know what they're saying, because you're going to want to look that up when you get home. Online information is good, and in preparing this presentation, I was able to learn that one of the things that internet sites get is known as a HON code, which means Health on the Internet, and it's a code that says they have passed, so to speak, 10 quality standards. And at the end of a web page like WebMD or whatever you're going to go to, it'll have a little box with HON code. And that's a good way to know if this is good information. Testimonials are not always the best information, but just be sure that you're getting good information from the internet and check it out. Here are some examples of good websites that are done by nonprofit kidney organizations that may help you, that have a lot of information that is updated regularly. Kidney School is an exceptionally good website, in my opinion. I provide this information to patients all the time. It has several modules that a person can choose from to learn about any different number of things, so it's not overwhelming all at one time. If it's treatment options you want to learn about, you can go to that. If it's depression you want to learn about, you can go to that. And it just has so many things, and it's very well done. And it was developed actually by the same organization that has developed the presentation for today. So I think this is an exceptionally well done set of education, and I use it for my patients all the time. Some of the takeaways that I'd like for you to remember from today is that you really can have a good future with kidney disease. I've been able to see this with patients for the last 30 years, and it's been a great source of encouragement for me. People have lived decades after their kidneys failed, but it doesn't happen just by accident. You are a very important part of the reason that this can happen for you. You are the central part of your care team. Choose how you look at things. Learn all you can. Ask until your questions are answered in a way that you understand. We, as your healthcare team, are here to serve you. Become your own expert. Here are some websites to get more information. And I thank you so much for being a part of our presentation today on living with kidney disease, having a good future. Thank you.